talk about what's going on in Ukraine and the Middle East in the 9 o'clock hour. But since we went down this rabbit hole, let's just stay there if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Sure, as you like.
Okay, so let's just start with that right now. You mentioned about Iran. The president says this is economic D-Day. We will now put forth the biggest effort to cripple them economically, to try to bring them to their knees when it comes to, and I'm paraphrasing here, when it comes to their nukes, the Strait of Hormuz, and the rest. And he's threatened anybody who wants to stand with them. And now we see reports that they're really trying to embed themselves with both China and Russia. In a way, sir, it's almost what you were asking for, because Donald Trump's saying, hey, listen, you're either going to be with us or against us. It's a way of twisting people's arms, but I think the White House realizes can't go it alone. We're going to need some other people to help bring this situation with Iran to a close.
Well, that's certainly been my advocacy, and the op-ed that I wrote in the Washington Times about 2 weeks ago now was advocating some additional pressures. You have several pressures, Rich, when you're talking about an enemy like this. You're talking about force, which is bombing. If you could create regime change, which would create a real stable situation in the Middle East, you would need to do that through an invasion, which we're not going to do. I think the goal at this point has been to try to keep the economic Strait of Hormuz open. But look, I want to just make a quick comment. It seems to me that the thing may be moving on from the U.S. If Oman and Iran at this point are reaching a tentative agreement to control the strait jointly, I think we should keep our eye on the Gulf states. They are business people. They're selling oil. They're making money. And they don't like it that this war has caused Iran to attack them. So I think that what we may be seeing here, and I think we should be watchful of, is whether the Gulf states are basically saying, look, we can make a better deal with Iran than we can with America. If we can make a deal with them in order to keep the strait open and to allow us to not be attacked by missiles from Iran, that's what we'll do. If that should happen, then at that point, I wonder what the American role really is. So, this war has been going on a long time now. I think it was started in a way that I think we need to have an explanation as to the strategy. It goes on, but I think that there are developments moving forward at this point that we need to watch.
Interesting with Oman, because the president said, I'm going to bomb the you-know-what out of you if you join in with these people. Again, it's not international waterway, but it is international transit. The interesting part was UAE has said they are going to no longer do any business, not have anything to do with Iran. Former central bank advisor for Iran has just come out and said, well, this isn't as bad as it is, but if UAE pulls out, well, the people that are suffering the worst are the young people who can't find jobs and the poor people that can't feed themselves under this economic assault from the United States of America. I think it's rather interesting that now we're going to go this way. And you got somebody like Scott Bessent who knows exactly which levers to push and which ones to pull to really affect some change.
Yep, the force side of this, the bombing has not yet worked to achieve the political goal that the president administration is trying to do. So now he's going to add economic pressure, and that's good. So let's see if that would make a change in the political situation there. And then, of course, I've been advocating also for some diplomatic efforts. And it's very important that we capture the message and make it clear why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's been lacking the entire time. So you got all these elements of statecraft that have to be put together. But I see the economic piece now being applied.
Well, the other part, I think people always forget that there's three legs to that school. There's the bombing, the bombs and the bullets. There's the economic pressure, and then there's the morale. And if you're going to have the people not being able to find jobs and economic woes, and you're going to be able to cripple them, you can have all the bombs in the world. But we saw if morale collapses, then the regime's in big trouble.
That's right. I'm not sure that we've seen any evidence yet of Iranian population morale collapse. I don't think we've seen that yet. But look, this is the thing. We're trying to see if we can't bring Iran out of this conflict by making them surrender through all these different kinds of pressures. It's very similar to what's going on in Europe, what the Russians are trying to do to the Ukrainians. Again, life is long here. Iran will be around long after this war is over with, and they're going to make adjustments. Let's find out what those adjustments are going to be.
Well, that's where I want to segue next is to something that you keep an eye on, and that's what's going on between Russia, Ukraine, and Western Europe. I know the Russian military doctrine is we will escalate to de-escalate, and if I have to escalate to de-escalate, that means my battle plans aren't going very well. That means I've got trouble at home, and right now we see Vladimir Putin escalating this thing bigger than he has in quite a while with some of these missiles that he's shooting towards Kiev and Ukraine. What does that tell you that he's now going to, at this point in August, ramp up and try to escalate this thing even more than it's been over the last few weeks and months?
Look, I think that we need to remember all this stuff is linked. I've said that over and over again, and we need to remember that we're in a global conflict at this point. The Chinese are certainly watching. I wanted to say it once again that I believe that the Mideast war is a giant diversion away from what America is supposed to be doing. We just pulled an aircraft carrier, the only aircraft carrier that we had in the Pacific, out of the Pacific. Don't you think maybe the North Koreans and the Chinese are watching that? And meanwhile, the Middle East conflict is destroying all of our munitions, and it's creating serious political problems for us when we really need to be focusing on the critical points. And those 2 points really are the Western or the Pacific with Taiwan, and especially Ukraine, because that's the actual shooting war that is actually going on. And, but the fundamental political question that I think Americans need to be thinking about is Europe important to the security of the United States, or isn't it? And I believe that it is, based on my experience as a U.S. ambassador. Based on that, Russia must not win. And you're right, he's stepping up the attacks now. He's stepping them up. And with winter around the corner in Ukraine, it's extremely dangerous. Personally, I believe what we will probably end up seeing is more involvement in Ukraine from the Europeans, who have a lot at stake, and frankly, in the end, probably more from the United States as well.
I think it's interesting that you look. I think when you look at the positioning of the aircraft carriers, we have more than everybody else. We have 11. China has 1. Russia, I think they've. I don't even know if theirs is operational right now. The last couple of times they've had to bring it back under tow because it just didn't work. I think there's one thing that we're going to find out at the end of this is that we need a couple more aircraft carriers. We're scheduled for 15, but now they're talking about whether the next ones will be like the Ford class, which is brand new, and they're deciding whether we're going to have steam or electric magnetic catapults and the cost of all of those. But the other part of that is I saw this interesting post the other day, sir, that the last time we pulled our aircraft carrier out of there, the Chinese go, oh, look, all of a sudden, and then a couple of submarines popped up out of nowhere, and the Chinese actually had started an exercise that they hadn't planned, but they were going to flex their muscle because the carrier left, and all of a sudden a couple of our submarines showed up, and they all hustled back over to their port. So we'll see the cat and mouse that'll happen once the Washington leaves the Indo-Pacific.
That's a very good point that you made about the fact that we have additional vessels just besides the aircraft carrier. But the aircraft carrier is usually a very powerful placement. And, to your listeners, just recognize we have 11. And the way that works, and we all know that because they're based in Hampton Roads right down here, is that you always have about a third on station, a third in port, and a third in transit. So it's not like that we've got 11 carriers we can disperse all at one time around the world. But we do have additional Navy, and our submarine forces are very powerful also. So the U.S. Navy continues to be a really powerful American weapon, and a weapon on behalf of other people. But then there's the political question. Are we working with allies or aren't we?
And that's where
my position is we should be.
Exactly, 100%. All right, we're going to continue with Governor Gilmore. We'll turn our attention to the Commonwealth. Governor Spanberger had some pretty big words for her predecessor who lived in the mansion before her. I'm going to ask Governor Gilmore, when do you own it? When do you look back at what you inherited? And then when do you take over and you take responsibility for running the Commonwealth? So I want to ask him about that and a couple other things. We'll do that coming up at 9 o'clock with Governor Jim Gilmore. All right, today's program is brought to you by our friends at Pearson Signature Dealerships. You want to take ownership of a relationship? Well, then you tell people up front, here's what I have for you. And that's what they do at Pearson Signature Dealerships. They say right up front, you know what? Here's what I'm going to tell you. We're going to stand by this vehicle. You don't have to ask for it. We just tell you this is what we're doing. That's accountability. That's responsibility. That's what Pearson Signature Dealership does. That's how they build these relationships.